Well, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this Saturday morning to honor our friend and our captain, David Baker. People here as a testimony to who he is and who he was. And on behalf of all the men and women of the Mesquite Fire Department, we are grateful to have this opportunity to spend just a few minutes to honor his life and his legacy with us. Captain Baker had a unique place in my life 25 plus years ago. I was looking to become a firefighter, didn't know much about what that entailed, and made a quick visit to Station 7 because it was near my house, and Captain Baker was working that day. So I spent a couple of hours sitting in the day room, and that wasn't a joke. It was only a couple of hours talking about the fire service with Captain Baker, and he kind of cemented the foundation of what I saw in the fire service and his love for that, and I hope in my life that has continued to grow based on that legacy. So you guys know as much as I do, we sacrifice a lot as firefighters. You as family members sacrifice a lot as firefighters, families, and Captain Baker exemplified the love for the third of his life that he spent with us, and to his family, we're so grateful that you shared him with us for that amount of time. If you knew Captain Baker, you knew he loved his district and Six's district. He loved the people that were here, and he loved the city of Mesquite. And on many occasions, I heard him say, if you don't like making calls, then just go find you another job, because that's what we do. And you saw that in his life, that he knew the people that were in his district. He knew the district better than anybody knew that area of town. But the biggest thing is he was willing to talk about the tradition and the honor that came with being a firefighter. And for many of us, that is something that has lived in us and grown in us. And we speak now a lot about creating a culture. And David Baker was all about culture. He was all about the love of the job and what we do. We looked through his file, and if you came to his retirement, you might have heard some of this, but we found this humorous, and I just want to read it to you real quick. At his 2-month evaluation, his captain stated and wrote that he was uncertain about David's attitude concerning fire department tradition. So if you know David Baker in the fire department, that was not a concern for David Baker. He loved the tradition, as you see his friends from New York that are here. Thank y'all for coming, by the way. You know that he loved the tradition of what we do. And as I think about David, and I think about him leaving us in the fire department, our goal is always, what kind of legacy do we leave? David taught us a lot about how to treat people. He taught us a lot about how to care for the history of what we do. And you know, he was a history buff with both the fire service and with World War II especially. But most of all, he taught us a history of how to take care of each other. And I think if you look on the back row and the row and all the retirees that are here, that's a testimony to him and what he did for us. So this morning we hope that you join us in honoring him. We want him to know we will continue his legacy. We'll continue to build that tradition and that camaraderie and the love for each other and the love for the fire department. So at this time, I'd like to invite John Howell up to speak on Captain Baker's behalf.
Good morning. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is John Howell, and David Baker is a dear and valued friend of mine. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I want to thank Judy and Courtney and Adam, John Austin and Peyton for including me here today. We gather today to celebrate and honor the life of David Baker, a remarkable individual who touched many lives and so many with his sunny disposition, his love of people, love of a great story, generosity, and kindness. I will share some personal thoughts here, but overall, I know I won't be telling you anything you don't know. You see, the hallmarks of a life well lived is one where your most important values are known to everyone because of how you lead your life. David loved his family. He loved people. He loved stories, was kind and generous, and it was obvious to anyone he met. He never met a stranger, me included. It's not a mystery, but clear values demonstrated in his everyday interactions with all of us. And there's a lesson in there for all of us. It is said that a lasting impact is made not through our words or even our actions, but in how you make people feel. That's what people remember, how you made them feel, how you made them feel. It is said, so David always said, every day is a good day, but some days are better than others. I love that. And that leads me to tell you how I first came to know David. I've known David for over 23 years now. My brother was a New York City firefighter with FDNY Ladder 2. My brother George was killed at the World Trade Center on 9/11. And I met David at an event some months after, him and Tom Lindsay. And this man insisted on being my friend. And at that time, I was not interested in making any friends. But he was determined and persistent and so kind. And David met with my entire family there. And I knew he found such joy in meeting my brother's wife and his young daughter. As a side note, I expect many of you have seen pictures of my niece from that day, as David enjoyed very much sharing that story. He insisted on having me come out here to Mesquite. He wanted me to meet his family, his fellow firefighters, see the Mesquite Rodeo. And yes, there was brisket. He and Tom Lindsay took me to at least 4 firehouses in Mesquite, and they introduced me to everyone. I felt like I was running for office. And why would these people want to meet me? I'm nobody. But they wanted to meet me because David Baker was my friend. And over the years, I'd received regular calls to check in and catch up. And of course, boxes, gift boxes, many gift boxes full of Mesquite Fire Department t-shirts and hats for me and my children. I was particularly moved when David asked me to join him at his retirement party and then asked if I would speak at the event. Again, I thought, I'm nobody. And what would I possibly say? When I conclude my remarks here, you'll say, it's not a surprise that guy can't stop talking. And maybe that's why David and I became such great friends. We both had a lot to say. But again, my good friend David Baker made me feel valued and special. He joined me a few years ago at Ladder 2 for the 20th anniversary at 9/11, and it was a source of great pride for me to have David and his family there with me in New York. And just a few weeks ago in Charlotte, David and Judy and his grandsons were at my house in Charlotte for some Carolina pulled pork barbecue. It's not Texas barbecue, but not half bad. And it was a great joy to introduce David to all of my friends, neighbors, and coworkers. There was well over 100 people at my house, and I'm confident David met and talked to every single person there. He had stories to share. As a retired firefighter, David dedicated his life to protecting and serving the community, always putting others before himself. And not just a hero in his professional life, but also a loving family man. His devotion to his family was evident in everything he did. His wife, his children, his grandchildren. Whether it was spending quality time with loved ones or offering a listening ear or providing unwavering support or a long meandering story. David was the cornerstone of his family, and his love knew no bounds. His family was his pride and joy. There's a poem by Linda Ellis called The Dash, and I'm sure you all have heard it, and it really refers to the dash between our birth date and the date of our passing. And it notes that what matters the most was the dash between the years. And the dash represents all the time they spent on earth. And now only those who love them know what that timeline is worth. And I think about why we're here and the David Baker we all know. And that dash was worth a lot. It certainly was a lot to me. Generosity was at the core of David's character. He was always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need. His acts of kindness, both big and small, left a lasting impact on everyone fortunate enough to know him. And it seemed he was on a mission to spread joy and compassion everywhere he went. I believe that. As we remember David today, let us celebrate the incredible legacy he leaves behind. His love, his generosity, and kindness will continue to inspire us all. Though he's no longer here with us in person, his spirit will live on in our hearts, all that knew and loved him. And so we grieve. Grieving is a selfish thing, really. It's about us. It's about me. It's how we feel and our profound sense of loss. What about us here? Then it struck me that that is the measure of a person in their life. It's the impact that they have on other people and how we make them feel. We grieve because we love David, and we grieve because of how he made us feel. We grieve for the things he did for us and with us, and we grieve for the way he touched our lives. And we grieve because we know our lives are richer because of him. And we grieve because we are afraid of the thought of our lives without him. This is why we celebrate and are grateful for God's gift to us. God's gift to us for the time that we had with David Baker here with us. And this is why we celebrate that life that was lived and lived so well. Rest in peace, David Baker. Your life was a testament to the power of love, generosity, and kindness. You will be deeply missed, but never forgotten. Thank you so much. With that, I will pass it to Adam Baker.
Good morning, youngsters. I've written and rewritten this over and over. This probably isn't the best version, but that's how it goes. I got here this morning and I told my mom, I said, I finally figured out what I'm going to say. And there's only a few curse words, and that was about as close as she's come to being in a Mesquite ambulance. While I've been sitting here, I've realized I've made a couple of mistakes. Agreeing to do this was probably the first one. And then agreeing to speak after Keith and John was probably the second mistake. I strongly considered coming up and singing a song and then making Graydon read this. But that's not how the programs are printed. Occasionally in life, you meet someone whom their profession is more than just a job. It's an inseparable part of their identity. And I'm lucky to know a few people that are like that. My wife, Johanna, works for the Arlington Independent School District as a teacher, but she's truly a teacher. She loves teaching children, showing them how to read, and watching them flourish. My sister Courtney is a phlebotomist. She spends her days poking people with sharp objects and drawing blood. And honestly, I couldn't think of a more perfect fit. Dad was the same way. He worked for the city of Mesquite, and he served with the Mesquite Fire Department. Firefighting was his career, but being a fireman was just who he was. Helping people in their moments of need wasn't just a job for him, it was a calling. It was always incredible to me how people seemed to sense that about him. We'd be out and strangers would approach him and ask him if he was a fireman or ask him to help with a flat tire or a dead battery. As a kid, I always thought it was because of his mustache, but really I think people could just sense that he was friendly and helpful. I never saw him without a mustache. He had it my whole life. Before I was born, my mom begged him and begged him and begged him to shave his mustache. And he shaved it. And I think it was 3 or 4 days before he had to tell her that he had shaved it. He grew it back and he never shaved it again. He was hired as a fireman the year that I was born, so I never really knew him as anything else. Growing up, I thought it was really cool that he was a fireman, but I didn't think that much about it. Everybody's parents, you feel like they all do something kind of cool. As I got older, I noticed the traits that attracted him to a career in the fire service. He was able to work through a problem or the unexpected, and he didn't shy away from a challenge. I think one of my earliest childhood memories illustrates this perfectly. I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. In that house, the bathroom was across the hall from my bedroom. So that's where I would go to the bathroom. So there I am sitting in the dark and minding my own business. And I watched his dad came in, quietly getting ready for a shift. He would get dressed and he would get ready in that bathroom so that he wouldn't wake up my mom. Unfortunately for the both of us, he needed to use the bathroom too. So in the dark, unaware that the toilet was already occupied, he began to sit down. Until I reached up with my tiny little hands and let him know that seat was taken. What followed was a moment of quiet chaos. But somehow he handled it in a way where I was able to avoid years of therapy. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure if he ever used the bathroom in the dark again. But I do know that in our next house, everybody got their own bathrooms. When I was a little bit older, I actually got a glimpse of him doing real firefighter hero stuff. We were at a baseball practice, and just down from the baseball field, there was a track. And everyone at the track started screaming for help. Without hesitation, he began to run towards the track, and I tried my best to keep up. He got down to the track, and he found a woman who was in need. Everyone down there was screaming. It was pure chaos. And amid the panic, he just made his way to the middle of the crowd and started doing CPR. Within a few minutes, and before the ambulance arrived, he got her back, and she began talking. It was one of the wildest things that I've ever seen. Afterwards, he didn't really say much about it. He talked to the paramedics for a few minutes, and then we went right back up to baseball practice. A couple months later, he was interviewed by a popular TV show at the time, Rescue 911. His story didn't make the show, but I always thought it was remarkable. There is a small chance that after interviewing him, they realized they couldn't fit everything he wanted to say in an hour show, but it was cool nonetheless. He always did a really good job of being there for his family and the people he cared about. I know he's gone every third day, but I don't remember him missing anything. He was always there when it was important. When I was a kid, sometimes Santa would come a day early or a day late. The holidays were always flexible. But no matter what, he was always present for the moments that mattered. For us, he was our personal 911. He was the guy that you called if you were sick or you were hurt or in a bind and needed some help. Before I was married, my wife Johanna found herself in need of some help. Back then, she was still using her dad's Diamond Shamrock card for fuel. And she needed gas, and there was only one Diamond Shamrock left in all of Dallas. She and her roommate ventured out in the middle of the night to get fuel, which she was able to do. But she also locked her keys in her car. The gas station was closed, and it was 2 a.m., and I was out of town, so she called Dad. She told him where she was at. It was really scary. And she said she was shocked at how fast he got there. Afterwards, he told me, he said, Josie, that's what he called her. He said, Josie needs to find somewhere else to get gas. The night my restaurant burned down, he was my first phone call. I called him at about 3 a.m., and he almost beat me to Grapevine. He was supposed to work the next day, so he showed up in his job shirt, and we stood and watched it burn. And as we were standing there, a firefighter from a nearby department walked up and saw him, and he looked at my dad and he said, "It must be really bad if they're calling people from Mesquite." And Dad looked at him and responded, "If they'd called Mesquite first, there wouldn't be any fire left for you to fight." He didn't really ever talk with me about the calls he made or what he did at work. It wasn't really something we ever discussed until I became a fireman. What he talked about was how much he enjoyed being a fireman and the people he worked with. He truly appreciated the people he worked with and was constantly telling stories of them and their adventures and mishaps. He cared so deeply about them and their families. The people that he worked with and the people he was able to help were the most important things to him when it came to being a fireman. Being there for a fellow firefighter, no matter the department, was very important to him. He had a personality that always seemed to leave an impression. A couple of weeks ago, we received a very kind message from a Houston firefighter. He'd been in Dallas years ago for a line-of-duty death, and for whatever reason, Dad had ended up cooking him breakfast. Now, I've cooked a lot of eggs, but I don't think I've ever cooked any that were so good somebody remembered me years later. He just had a knack for befriending people. He believed deeply in the mission of Local 1518, and he dedicated his time to the association in the hopes of making things better for firefighters and their families. He was proud of everything the association has accomplished and continues to accomplish. He was truly a brother to his fellow firefighters and their families. Even in retirement, he'd stay connected. He called me every morning after my shift, eager to chat about the department, to share the latest gossip, or to ask me if I had any new rumors or stories to tell. His friends were a diverse group, and he never met a stranger. He was kind to people that he encountered to an embarrassing degree. He was so friendly, I'm not sure how he wasn't kidnapped as a child. He loved social media and the ability to keep in touch with people and stay up to date on their lives. I'm confident that if social media had been invented 40 years ago, he would have been an influencer. When it came to family, he was absolutely a family man. He was married to my mom for 55 years. It's a long time. People murder people, and they don't have to serve that much time. He was an active and attentive father, and he was so proud that he had a brilliant and athletic child. And I think he was fond of me too. He loved his grandchildren, and he bragged on them constantly. Our relationships over the years, it changed and it evolved, as all father-son relationships do. I'm sure it was tough for him having to raise a son who knew everything there was to know at the age of 16, but he was able to cope. These past few weeks, I've reflected on our similarities and our differences, and it's tough to admit, but we had a few things in common. We could both be stubborn. We both enjoy a good story. Occasionally, we might voice a strong opinion about something. We could talk too much. I could go on and on. But there's one thing that we definitely disagreed on. That was funerals. I hate funerals. I hate them with every fiber in my being. It's not how I process grief, and given the choice, I would never attend another one. But whenever someone would die, my dad would call me and let me know, and we'd talk about them and tell a couple of stories. And eventually he would ask, "Are you going to go to the funeral?" And I would always throw a fit. I would complain and tell him how much I hated funerals. And he would say, you need to go. Over and over he would say, you need to go, you need to go. And I would tell him that I hate it and I don't need to go. Over and over he would say, you need to go. And eventually he would always say, you don't go to the funeral for yourself. You go for them and you go for their family. So today, on behalf of my family, I want to thank each of you for being here. It means the world to us. Thank you.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. It's you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow, and I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But when ye come and all the flowers are dying, and I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. And I shall hear the soft new tread above me, and oh, my grave will warmer, sweeter be. For you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me.
Good morning. If you don't know, my name is Austin Holt, Teddy, and I'm the chaplain for the Mesquite Fire Department. I'm very thankful to be up here given an opportunity to speak, and I'm very thankful to have gotten to witness your family talk about David Baker. And I am so thankful that y'all allowed Graydon to sing instead of Adam. John, thank you so much for coming down here to good old Mesquite. It speaks volumes about you and about David and Adam. Thank you for a very heartfelt word. Adam asked me to share a message and conclude with a prayer. I'll try to keep it brief but meaningful. Like many of you, when I heard of Captain Baker's passing, I was saddened. I remember the first time I met Captain Baker. I was a rookie, not even assigned to a fire station, helping with a retirement party. And he sought me out. He enthusiastically wanted to know who I was, where I came from, and whom I was related to. And upon finding out that I was going to DeSoto Fire Academy, he got real excited and said, "I'll come watch." From my first experience with Captain Baker, my impression was that he's very enthusiastic and very nice. Although he was retired, I viewed him as sort of an ambassador for the fire service. He certainly still acted like a firefighter, and he constantly shared private Facebook messages about firefighting, and he seemed to know every firefighter from across the country. He was also known for acts of service, like preparing Christmas meals for the Mesquite City workers. And so I was saddened to hear about Captain Baker's passing. I'm also saddened by how we lost Captain Baker. It was sudden, emergent, and unplanned. Sometimes when we lose the ones whom we love, we watch them fade slowly. And that's hard in its own right. Other times, like with Captain Baker, we lose our loved ones in a flash. It's unplanned and disorienting. And that brings with it its own set of challenges and grief. And that grief can be different for different people. I'm also a part-time student minister, and I'm always telling my kids to ask the question, where do you see God? In the good times and the bad times. So I ask family and friends of Captain Baker, where do you see God? In the moments leading up to Captain Baker's death, and where do you see God now? And I know that's a really hard question to answer. Thinking through this question, I can't help but be reminded of the story of Lazarus in the Gospel of John. You all know it. Lazarus comes back from the dead, but he has to die in the first place. In many ways, this is a story that asks, where is God? The story begins with a family from the village of Bethany, two sisters, Mary and Martha, and a beloved brother, Lazarus. And Lazarus is really sick. But also, God is walking the earth in this story as the Son of God, Jesus. But he isn't present in the village of Bethany. In fact, Jesus is miles away across the River Jordan in a different region. Lazarus gets so sick that Mary and Martha send a message to Jesus. Jesus hears it, but cryptically replies, "This illness does not lead to death, but to God's glory." To which, if you're like me, you ask, well, Lazarus does die. What do you mean, Jesus? And the rest of the story is that Lazarus does die. Now, when someone who is as well loved as Lazarus or Captain Baker dies, the whole city comes out. And the different people involved in the memorial of Lazarus find themselves experiencing grief in different ways. A group of people travel from Jerusalem to mourn with Mary and Martha, but as we find out later in the story, they don't quite know where to go and might even say they don't know what to say. Mary doesn't even want to leave the house, and I could imagine the last thing she wants to do is to go to church. And when the Lord finally decides to return, his disciple Thomas responds with cynicism. Judea is hostile to us. Let's go that we might die with Lazarus. Different people having different reactions. And I ask you again, where's God in the story? Well, finally, after 2 days, God comes to Bethany. Martha goes out to meet Jesus, and meeting Jesus, Martha declares, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And God listens to her honesty, her honest grief. He answers cryptically, though. He will rise again, which Martha says, well, yeah, of course, the resurrection is going to happen. And then Jesus responds, I am the resurrection. Do you believe me? To which Martha says, yes. But in my opinion, it doesn't really resolve the grief or the tension Martha is experiencing. But we don't know the rest of their conversation. We do know that Martha goes out to Mary, who wouldn't leave home, and says, the teacher is calling for you. And that's enough to make Mary get up quickly and go out to meet God. Mary also says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Mary weeps, and the group from Jerusalem weep with her. And what we see next is a very human response from God. The King James Version translates it as, Jesus groaned in his spirit and was troubled. Jesus asks, "Where have you laid him?" And when the crowd responds, "Lord, come and see," Jesus weeps. He is a man who sheds tears for his loved ones. God listens and sees Mary in her grief. And again, God groans with himself and comes to the tomb of Lazarus. You know the rest of the story, but I'd like to point out a few things quickly. The tomb is the threshold between the living and the dead. It is the door that keeps death away from life. But God chooses to stand at that door, calling out. He calls out to Lazarus, but he calls out to all of us to leave behind death and choose life. But maybe you're like Martha, who says, "Don't take away the stone door. The stench is bad." Maybe you think the stench inside of you is too smelly and too dark to share. Maybe I'm too inadequate, filled with doubt. But God is not afraid of that stench. Jesus commands the stone door to be removed, and Lazarus responds and comes to freedom. He is unbound and let go. There's one more detail I want to point out, and that's the final response of Jesus in this story. As they move the stone door, he says, "Father, I thank you for having heard me." So I ask, where is God? God is listening this whole time. Where do you find yourselves in this story? Are you in a place where you don't want to even get out of bed, nonetheless your house? Are you wanting to help out but not knowing what to say? Are you angry? Are you doubting? Wherever you are in your grief at this moment, no, God is listening to you. He is not afraid of your stench. He's not an angry old man sitting on a cloud waiting to punish you. He is the resurrection and the life, and he loves you so much that when you cry, he cries. God may not feel nearby, but God is listening. May you take comfort in this as we remember Captain David Baker. May you respond to God's voice calling through the grave, saying, "Trust me, I am the resurrection." May you be unbound and freed from the fear of death and its consequences. And when you hear the Lord, may you get up quickly and see the glory of the Lord. Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you for this moment to come together and remember the great Captain David Baker. But we also mourn and we offer grief wherever we are in that process. And we give thanks that we can be honest with each other and honest with you in our disappointments and our hopes. Let us remember the legacy of Captain Baker with our stories and how we act. And may you bring peace and comfort to all those who are in here. Thank you, Lord, for your good gifts, and we look to your future. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now we have just a few more fire services.
Throughout history, the fire service has been steeped in tradition. The ringing of the bell has long been associated with the life of a firefighter. Throughout the day and night, each alarm was sounded by a bell, which summoned these brave souls to answer the call and to place their lives in jeopardy for the good of their fellow citizens. And when the fire was out and the alarm had come to an end, it was the bell that signaled the completion of the call. We utilize these traditions as symbols which reflect honor and respect on those who have given so much and who have served so well. To symbolize the devotion that these brave souls had for their duty, a special signal of 3 rings 3 times, each representing the end of our brothers' duties and that they will be returning to quarters. And so to Captain David Baker, who selflessly committed his life for the good of his fellow man, his task completed, his duties well done, his last alarm, he is going home. With the ringing of the bell, let us recognize Captain David Baker one final time as he returns to quarters. Would all uniformed personnel please stand?
Attention all stations. Captain David Baker was hired as a Mesquite firefighter on November 13, 1978, and began his career and absolute love for the fire service. Captain Baker dedicated 37 and a half years to the Mesquite Fire Department. He promoted to driver in 1985, lieutenant in 1994, and made captain in year 2000. He was named Officer of the Year in 2007. A big highlight of his career was his son Adam coming on board and being able to work beside him for 2 years before he retired in April of 2016. David Baker passed on November 7th, 2024. Captain, rest easy. You made the sacrifice and ran the race. We will take it from here.
Thank you for traveling to come and remember Captain David Baker. Safe travels, and may you go in peace. You are dismissed.